The mahogany-paneled hearing room inside the Rayburn House office building was filled to capacity that humid Tuesday morning in September 2025. C-SPAN cameras captured every moment as Kellyanne Conway adjusted the microphone before her, her signature blonde hair gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. She had been summoned to testify before the House Oversight Committee regarding alleged Hatch Act violations during her tenure as counselor to President Trump. What unfolded next would become one of the most talked-about confrontations in congressional history. Seated directly across from Conway was Jasmine Crockett, the young Democratic representative from Texas. At 44, Crockett had already earned a reputation as one of Congress's sharpest interrogators. But even she could not have predicted what was about to happen. "Miss Conway," Crockett began, her tone calm but cutting, "you've built your entire career on what you've called alternative facts. Today, we're here for the actual truth." Conway's lips curved into the familiar smirk she'd worn through countless television interviews. She leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "Representative Crockett," she replied coolly, "I've handled far more formidable opponents since before you even graduated law school. You want to talk about facts? Let's discuss your voting record, your campaign finances, and the real reason you're so eager to make headlines today." The room erupted. Committee members called for order as photographers snapped furiously. It was the beginning of what would soon become the most watched congressional testimony of the year. Before we dive deeper into this remarkable exchange, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss our breaking political coverage. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens next. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Let's see how many states and countries are tuned in to witness this political showdown. The hearing had been set for 10 a.m., but tension had been simmering since dawn. Outside the Rayburn building, protesters from both sides gathered, some holding signs reading, "Conway for prison," others waving banners that said, "Witch hunt." The stakes couldn't have been higher. Kellyanne Conway entered the hearing room at 9:45, dressed in a sharp navy suit that balanced authority with defiance. At 58, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had survived 4 years in the Trump White House, years filled with media battles and personal controversies that would have ended most political careers. Her legal team followed close behind, 3 men in nearly identical black suits who looked less than eager to be there. Conway had reasons to remain confident. Once an unknown pollster, she had become one of the most recognizable figures in American politics. She was the first woman to manage a winning presidential campaign, the originator of the phrase, "alternative facts," and a veteran of endless political storms. Yet, she had never faced Jasmine Crockett. Representative Jasmine Felicia Crockett arrived even earlier, at 9:30 a.m., with her chief of staff and 2 legislative aides. Where Conway radiated cool composure, Crockett exuded focused intensity. Her deep purple dress was chosen intentionally. Her staff would later note it symbolized the blend of red and blue, a nod to her message of unity. Crockett's rise had been swift, from public defender to state representative to member of Congress in under a decade. She had built a national profile for her precise questioning, her ability to cut through political rhetoric, and her refusal to be intimidated, whether facing CEOs, cabinet officials, or now Kellyanne Conway. The preliminary proceedings were slow to begin. Committee Chairman James Comer called the hearing to order, outlining its purpose, to examine potential Hatch Act violations during Conway's time as counselor to the president. The Hatch Act, for those unfamiliar, bars federal employees from engaging in political activity while performing official duties. Conway had been cited several times by the Office of Special Counsel for such violations, but she had never faced formal repercussions, until now. Chairman Comer then yielded the floor for opening statements, and the room fell silent. Everyone knew this wasn't only about the Hatch Act. It was about accountability, about the Trump era, and whether anyone from that period would finally be held responsible for years of controversy and misinformation. Kellyanne Conway sat motionless, hands folded, her expression unreadable. Trained by the best media strategists, she avoided nervous gestures and kept her eyes locked on the cameras. She understood that in Washington, perception often is reality, and she intended to project strength. The ranking member concluded his opening remarks with a pointed statement, "Miss Conway, you took an oath to serve the American people, not a political party or a single man. Today, we'll reveal whether you upheld that oath." Conway's attorney leaned in to whisper something. She nodded slightly, then faced the microphone. "Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committee," she began, I'm here voluntarily to answer your questions. I have served my country with honor and integrity, and I reject any claims to the contrary. I look forward to clarifying the record. Her tone was measured and composed, the same Kellyanne Conway who had sparred with reporters for years and defended the indefensible with ease. Yet, there was a subtle edge in her voice, as if she understood this time might be different. The chairman opened the floor for 5-minute rounds of questioning. The first few came from Republican allies, offering Conway a chance to present her narrative as a devoted public servant unfairly targeted by partisan critics. Then it was Jasmine Crockett's turn. Miss Conway, Crockett began without glancing up from her notes, a deliberate move everyone recognized. Let's start with something simple. Do you know what perjury means? Conway's eyes narrowed. Of course, Representative. I'm an attorney. Good, Crockett replied, finally looking up, her gaze sharp. Then you understand that lying to Congress is a federal crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison. I'm fully aware of the law, Representative Crockett. Are you suggesting something? Crockett gave a faint, knowing smile, the kind prosecutors give when a witness has taken the bait. I'm not suggesting anything, Miss Conway. I'm simply ensuring you understand the seriousness of what you're about to say. Now, let's discuss March 6, 2020. Conway shifted slightly in her seat. That date was etched in her memory. It was the day she appeared on Fox News from the White House lawn, using her official title to publicly endorse a Republican Senate candidate, an explicit violation of the Hatch Act. On that day, Crockett continued, pulling up a video on her tablet, you stood on White House grounds and said, quote, Doug Jones is a failed senator, and Alabama needs to support Tommy Tuberville. Is that accurate? I was asked about the Alabama Senate race, Conway replied evenly, and I expressed my opinion. Miss Conway, you were standing on federal property, introduced by your official title, and speaking in your capacity as counselor to the president. The Office of Special Counsel specifically cited this as a violation. Correct. Conway's attorney leaned in to whisper, but she brushed him off. The OSC and I had disagreements about how the Hatch Act was interpreted. Disagreements. Crockett's tone sharpened slightly. Miss Conway, the OSC recommended your removal from federal service. That's not a disagreement. That's a federal agency determining you repeatedly broke the law. The room fell silent except for the faint sound of typing from the court reporter. C-SPAN's camera shifted between Conway and Crockett, catching every subtle expression. Representative, Conway began, steadying her tone, I've already addressed these matters. The OSC's interpretation was overly broad. Crockett interrupted, a rare move for the seasoned operative. I'm not interested in talking points, Miss Conway. I'm interested in facts. Here's one, you were cited for Hatch Act violations at least 10 times. Here's another, you publicly said, and I quote, let me know when the jail sentence starts. Do you recall saying that? Conway's composure wavered. That was taken out of context. The context, Crockett replied, holding up a document, was a reporter asking you about the OSC's findings. You laughed and said those exact words. It's on video. Would you like me to play it for the committee? Conway tried to regain control. Representative Crockett, I see what you're doing, trying to reopen the past because no one was ever held accountable. Crockett cut in. You're right, Miss Conway. That's exactly what I'm doing. The American people deserve to know why you believed you were above the law. I never believed I was above the law, Conway shot back, her tone sharpening. I was serving my country during an unprecedented time. And sometimes. Crockett pressed. Sometimes the law doesn't apply. Sometimes ethics don't matter if you think you're serving the right person. Conway's face flushed. That's not what I said. Then clarify it for us. When you violated the Hatch Act and the OSC confirmed multiple violations, what was your justification? My justification, Conway said firmly, was that I was doing my job, representing the administration's positions. Your job was to violate federal law. My job was to communicate with the American people from the White House lawn about the administration's agenda, by endorsing political candidates while using your official title. Crockett countered. Her tone grew sharper, each question landing with precision. Miss Conway, did President Trump ever instruct you to violate the Hatch Act? The room gasped. It was the question everyone had been waiting for, the one that could tie Trump directly to federal misconduct. Conway's lawyer quickly objected. That question calls for privileged communication. But Crockett was ready. Mr. Chairman, directing someone to commit a federal crime is not covered by executive privilege. The witness must answer. Chairman Comer hesitated. Republican members shifted uncomfortably. Miss Conway, you may answer, he said reluctantly. Conway took a deep breath. President Trump never directed me to violate any laws. But he never stopped you either, did he? Crockett pressed. When the OSC first cited you, did President Trump tell you to stop? The president supported his staff, that's not what I asked. Did he tell you to stop violating the Hatch Act? Yes or no? It's not that simple. It is a yes or no question, Miss Conway. After being cited for breaking federal law, did President Trump tell you to stop? Conway hesitated. Answering yes would admit she continued despite warning, saying no would suggest Trump allowed it. The president trusted me to do my job properly, so that's a no. He never told you to stop breaking the law. That was when Kellyanne Conway made her crucial mistake, or what she thought would be a strategic counterattack. Leaning forward, she spoke with the sharp, confident tone that had made her a fixture on cable news. Representative Crockett, I find it interesting that you're so focused on the Hatch Act when your own campaign has some serious issues to answer for. Crockett didn't react. We're not here to discuss me, Miss Conway. Oh, but I think we should, Conway continued, sensing an opening. If you want to talk about ethics and accountability, then let's discuss the $50,000 in campaign donations you received from a PAC currently under federal investigation. Republican members perked up. The unexpected turn changed the energy in the room. Crockett's face remained composed, but her posture shifted. She sat up straight, a faint, knowing smile forming at the corners of her mouth, a warning Conway didn't recognize. Miss Conway, Crockett said evenly, are you attempting to deflect from your own potential criminal conduct by making unfounded accusations against a member of Congress? They're not baseless. It's all public record. You're right. It is public record, Crockett replied calmly, catching everyone off guard. It's public record that I received fully legal campaign donations from a PAC that was later investigated and cleared of any wrongdoing. It's also public record that I chose to return those donations once questions were raised, even though I was under no obligation to do so. You know what else is public record? Crockett asked. Conway stayed silent. Your consulting fees, Crockett continued, the $500,000 you took from the Trump campaign while claiming to be an unpaid advisor, the shell companies you created to move that money, and the fact that you never properly disclosed those payments. Should we talk about that part of the public record, Miss Conway? Color drained from Conway's face. Her attorney leaned in, whispering urgently. I don't know what you're referring to, Conway said, though her voice had lost its edge. No. Then allow me to refresh your memory. Crockett pulled out a thick folder and spread several documents across the table, transfer records, bank statements, and corporate filings, all obtained through lawful FOIA requests and public record searches. Miss Conway, did you or did you not receive payments from the Trump campaign through CAC Consulting LLC while serving as counselor to the president? Any payments I received were for services rendered before joining the administration. These transfers are dated April 2020, Crockett replied. You were well within the administration then. Those were residual payments for prior work. Residual payments of $50,000 a month for work completed 3 years earlier? Crockett asked. Miss Conway, do you take this committee for fools? At that moment, Conway made her fatal mistake. Cornered and frustrated, she snapped back with the line that sealed her fate, Representative Crockett, I've dealt with far more intelligent opponents long before you graduated law school. You want to talk facts? Let's talk about your voting record, your campaign finances, and the real reason you're so desperate for attention today. The room erupted. Committee members shouted for order as the chairman struck the gavel repeatedly. Through it all, Crockett stayed composed, a small, knowing smile on her face. When silence finally returned, she leaned into her microphone. Miss Conway, I graduated from law school in 2006. Since then, I've worked as a public defender for people who couldn't afford justice. I served as a state legislator fighting for voting rights and criminal justice reform. And now, I'm a member of Congress holding people like you accountable, probably for the first time in your life. You know what you've been doing since 2006. Helping wealthy men mislead the American public. So, by all means, let's compare records. The room went still. You want to make this personal? Let's make it personal, Crockett continued. You question my intelligence. Let's discuss that. I graduated magna cum laude from Rhodes College. I earned my law degree from the University of Houston and passed the bar on my first attempt. You, on the other hand, went to law school, passed the bar, and spent your career doing political polling and media spin. You've never tried a case, never defended a client, never practiced law. You just play a lawyer on television. Conway tried to interject, but Crockett pressed on. You brought up my voting record. It's all public. I voted for healthcare, education, infrastructure, for working families. Your record? Defending a president impeached twice, who incited an insurrection and told over 30,000 documented lies. You mentioned campaign finances. I've already addressed mine, but let's talk about yours, about the dark money behind your polling firm, the foreign contacts you failed to report, and the fact that you're sitting here today because multiple federal agencies concluded you broke the law, yet you still act like the victim. Crockett opened her briefcase and withdrew another folder, this one marked with red tabs. The camera zoomed in as she opened the file slowly and deliberately. Miss Conway, I'd like to show you something. Committee Exhibit 47. She raised a document for the room to see. Conway's attorney immediately rose. Mr. Chairman, we have not been given these exhibits in advance. This is ambush tactics. Chairman Comer turned toward Representative Crockett. Representative, what is this document? This, Mr. Chairman, Crockett replied, is an email from Miss Conway's personal account to Trump campaign officials, dated June 15, 2020. It directly coordinates campaign strategy while she was serving as counselor to the president. This email was obtained lawfully through a subpoena to the campaign. Miss Conway's counsel was informed of these documents 3 weeks ago. Conway's lawyer sat down slowly, his face grim. Crockett continued, in this email, you wrote, and I quote, "We need to hit Biden on Hunter before the convention. I can do hits from the White House to give it more weight." Is this your email? Conway examined the document, her face turning pale. Miss Conway, is this your email? I would need to review this in context, she said quietly. The context, Crockett responded, is that you were using your official position to plan campaign attacks. That's not just a Hatch Act violation. It's potentially criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States. Are you aware of that? Conway's voice barely rose above a whisper. I wish to invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. The room erupted in noise. Taking the Fifth during a congressional hearing was often seen as an admission of guilt in the court of public opinion. You're invoking your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination? Crockett asked pointedly, ensuring the cameras caught every word. On the advice of counsel, yes, Conway replied. Let the record show that Miss Conway is refusing to answer questions about her potential criminal conduct, Crockett stated firmly. But let me ask you this, Miss Conway, and this isn't about criminal conduct, so you cannot take the Fifth, do you believe public servants should be held accountable when they break the law? Conway was cornered. If she said yes, she would implicate herself, if she said no, she would imply government officials were above the law. I believe in the rule of law, Conway said carefully. That's not what I asked, Crockett replied. Should public servants be held accountable when they break the law? Yes or no? It depends on the circumstances. It depends. So sometimes it's acceptable for government officials to break the law. That's not what I said. Then what are you saying? Crockett pressed. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're saying that when you break the law, there should be no consequences, but when others do, they should be prosecuted. Is that the alternative fact you want us to believe? Crockett picked up her tablet and connected it to the hearing room's display system. Suddenly, a video appeared on screens around the room. Miss Conway, do you recognize this video? It showed Conway at what appeared to be a private fundraiser, dated October 2020. Where did you get this? Conway demanded, her composure cracking. It was provided by a whistleblower, Miss Conway, someone at that fundraiser who was concerned about what they heard. Should I play it? Conway's lawyer whispered frantically to her, but she remained frozen. Crockett pressed play. On the screen, Conway addressed a room of donors. Her voice was clear, the Hatch Act. Please. That's for people who don't know how to work the system. You want to know the truth? We do whatever we need to do to win. The OSC can send all the letters they want. Who's going to enforce them? The president, he's the one telling me to go on TV and destroy Biden. The attorney general, he's on our side. Congress, they're too scared to do anything. We're untouchable, and after we win in November, we'll remember who stood with us and who didn't. The hearing room descended into chaos. Conway had just admitted on video to knowingly violating federal law with explicit support from the president and attorney general. Miss Conway, Crockett said over the noise, do you want to revise your earlier testimony about President Trump never directing you to break the law? Conway conferred desperately with her attorneys. Finally, one stood. Mr. Chairman, we request a recess to consult with our client. Denied, Crockett interjected before the chairman could respond. Miss Conway has had weeks to prepare for this hearing. She doesn't get to run away now that she's been caught misleading Congress. Miss Conway, you're still under oath. Did President Trump direct you to violate the Hatch Act? I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. Did Attorney General Barr knowingly allow you to violate federal law? I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. Did you lie to this committee today when you said you never thought you were above the law? I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. Crockett leaned back in her chair, letting the moment settle. Every major news outlet was broadcasting live. Conway repeatedly taking the fifth was devastating. But even cornered, Conway remained combative. During a pause as Crockett organized her papers, Conway seized her microphone. Representative Crockett, since you seem to have access to private videos and emails, I wonder what your constituents would think about your own private communications. What about your texts with progressive donors promising to destroy anyone connected to Trump? What about your coordination with activist groups to disrupt federal proceedings? You want to talk about criminal conspiracy? Let's discuss your conspiracy to conduct show trials and destroy lives for political gain. For the first time in the hearing, Crockett laughed, actually laughed. Miss Conway, are you seriously sitting here, after taking the fifth multiple times and being caught on tape admitting to illegal conduct, trying to accuse me of misconduct? You want to see my texts with donors here? Crockett pulled out her phone and held it up. I'll submit my phone to the committee right now for a full forensic review, every text, every email, every call log. Will you do the same? Conway stayed silent. That's what I thought, Crockett said. The hearing room was still electric. You see, Miss Conway, there's a difference between us. I have nothing to hide. You, on the other hand, have everything to hide, and the American people can now see that clearly. Crockett wasn't done. She had saved her most powerful evidence for the end. Miss Conway, I have one final document to present, she said, lifting a single sheet of paper. Committee Exhibit 52A. This is an immunity agreement between you and the Southern District of New York, dated January 21, 2021, one day after President Trump left office. According to this document, you agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in return for immunity from prosecution for your Hatch Act violations and other possible crimes. Is that correct? The hearing room went silent. The revelation stunned everyone. Conway's face turned pale. That's a sealed document. How did you? It was unsealed yesterday, Miss Conway, Crockett replied calmly, by order of a federal judge, specifically for use in this hearing. Now, did you or did you not agree to provide evidence against other Trump administration officials in exchange for immunity? Conway hesitated. I need to consult with counsel. You already consulted with federal prosecutors, Crockett pressed. You made a deal to protect yourself and betray your colleagues, and then you came here today and lied to Congress anyway. Do you understand what that means? It means your immunity agreement is void. You can now be prosecuted for everything, the Hatch Act violations, perjury, campaign finance issues, all of it. Conway's attorneys huddled beside her, whispering urgently. One stood up. Mr. Chairman, we request a recess. Our client requires immediate legal counsel. Chairman Comer agreed, but the damage was already done. As the committee went into recess, the room erupted into chaos. Reporters rushed to file their stories. Conway sat surrounded by her lawyers, looking shaken and defeated. Then came the moment that would dominate headlines. As Conway was being escorted out, Representative Jasmine Crockett called out, "Miss Conway." Conway turned, facing Crockett across the noisy chamber. "I want you to understand something," Crockett said firmly. "This isn't personal. This is about accountability, about showing the American people that no one is above the law. Not you, not your former boss, not anyone." Conway's response, caught on the still-live microphones, would replay endlessly on cable news. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started. You just declared war on half the country." Crockett's calm reply became instantly iconic. "No, Miss Conway. I just declared that the law matters. The half of the country that has a problem with that, they're the ones declaring war on democracy." Within minutes, "Crockett destroys Conway" was trending worldwide. Clips of the confrontation, Conway taking the fifth, the immunity deal revelation, the fundraiser footage, spread across every major platform. Cable news went into overdrive. On CNN, Anderson Cooper opened his broadcast saying, "We may have just witnessed the most consequential congressional hearing since Watergate." Conway hadn't just implicated herself, she might have implicated Trump's entire inner circle. On Fox News, Tucker Carlson called it a political show trial and a partisan attack, though even he couldn't ignore the damage caused by Conway's silence and the exposed immunity deal. Over on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow dedicated her entire program to analyzing every moment of the hearing. Jasmine Crockett didn't just expose Kellyanne Conway's falsehoods, she said. She revealed the broader culture of disregard for the law that defined the Trump administration. Social media was even harsher. Memes flooded in. Conway's shocked expression when the immunity document appeared became an instant classic. Someone remixed her invoking the fifth into a viral track. The fundraiser video played millions of times. But the most striking reaction came from an unexpected source, George Conway, Kellyanne's ex-husband and longtime Trump critic, who tweeted simply, "The truth always comes out. Always." Within hours, the Department of Justice announced a review of Conway's immunity agreement and testimony for potential perjury charges. The U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia confirmed that they were examining all evidence presented at the hearing. Legal experts quickly weighed in. "Conway is in serious legal jeopardy," said former federal prosecutor Preet Bharara on his podcast. Possible charges include perjury, conspiracy to violate the Hatch Act, campaign finance violations, and now, with her immunity deal likely void, the original Hatch Act offenses are back on the table. She could face real prison time. Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe tweeted, "Conway's testimony today was a masterclass in how not to testify before Congress. She walked into every trap and made her situation far worse with each answer." Legal analysts agreed the immunity deal revelation was especially damaging. It indicated that Conway had already confessed to certain offenses during her cooperation with prosecutors, admissions that could now be used against her. She struck a deal to save herself, then violated it by lying to Congress, said former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance. That's not just reckless, it's legally catastrophic. The fallout extended well beyond Conway. Republicans who had defended her now faced intense scrutiny. Several senators who once dismissed Hatch Act violations as minor were forced to issue new statements. Senator Mitt Romney commented, "Today's testimony raises serious concerns about the culture of lawlessness in the previous administration. No one is above the law." Most Republicans, however, deflected, accusing Democrats of politicizing the hearing. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy called it a witch hunt and argued that Democrats were relitigating the past instead of addressing the future. Democrats saw it differently. Speaker Hakeem Jeffries announced that the House would launch a broader investigation into Hatch Act violations during the Trump years. "What we learned today is only the beginning," he said. "We will follow the evidence wherever it leads." Senator Elizabeth Warren called for a special prosecutor to examine not only Conway but the entire Trump administration's potential criminal conduct. "This wasn't one rogue official," she said. "It was a coordinated effort to disregard federal law." For Representative Jasmine Crockett, the hearing was career-defining. Practically overnight, she went from a little-known freshman lawmaker to a national figure. Her campaign reported more than $2 million in small-dollar donations within 48 hours. Major networks flooded her with interview requests. When she appeared on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, the audience gave her a standing ovation. Asked how she prepared for the hearing, she smiled and said, "I just did what I always do, my homework." Miss Conway thought she could bluff her way through like always, but you can't bluff when someone has the receipts. The clip went viral, racking up millions of views. Progressive groups hailed her as a champion. Jasmine Crockett did what no one else has managed, said the president of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. She held a Trump official accountable. Still, Crockett remained grounded. In an op-ed for the Washington Post, she wrote, "This isn't about me or even Kellyanne Conway. It's about a fundamental truth: in America, no one is above the law. Not presidents, not advisors, not members of Congress, no one. The moment we forget that, we stop being a democracy and become something our founders fought to prevent." 2 days later, Conway pushed back. Appearing on Steve Bannon's podcast, she called the hearing a setup from the start and insisted the entire event had been politically motivated. "They obtained documents through questionable means, ambushed me with sealed evidence, and are trying to criminalize political differences." But even Bannon seemed doubtful. "Kellyanne, you took the fifth. How do you explain that to our audience?" he asked. Conway's response was revealing: "Sometimes you have to protect yourself from a corrupt system." Bannon pushed back, reminding her that she had just called the very system she helped run corrupt. The interview quickly fell apart. Conway came across as defensive, evasive, and increasingly frantic. When Bannon asked about her immunity deal, she refused to answer, saying her lawyers had instructed her not to. She tried deflecting again, attacking Crockett as an ambitious freshman who doesn't understand Washington, but her attacks fell flat. The evidence was overwhelming, the video damaging. Former Trump officials stayed silent. Even Donald Trump, normally quick to defend his allies, issued only a brief statement through a spokesperson: "Kellyanne Conway was a minor figure in my administration. I hardly knew her." It was a stunning betrayal and revealed how isolated Conway had become. Within a week, the investigation widened dramatically. The House Oversight Committee issued subpoenas to 6 more former Trump officials already cited for Hatch Act violations. The Department of Justice announced a broader probe into potential criminal breaches of the Hatch Act across the Trump administration. The FBI raided Conway's home and office, seizing files and electronic devices. More whistleblowers stepped forward. 3 former White House staffers provided new evidence, including emails and texts showing Conway coordinated with the Trump campaign while serving in an official role. One of the most damaging disclosures came from a former assistant who supplied recordings of Conway saying, "The Hatch Act doesn't apply to us. We're going to do whatever it takes to win, and if anyone has a problem with that, they can talk to the president." Forensic experts authenticated the recordings, adding to the growing mountain of evidence. 3 weeks after the hearing, the inevitable happened. Kellyanne Conway was indicted on multiple federal charges: 4 counts of violating the Hatch Act, 2 counts of perjury for lying to Congress, 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States, and 3 counts of making false statements to federal investigators. At a press conference, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia stated, "No one is above the law. These charges demonstrate our commitment to holding accountable those who betray the public trust and lie to Congress." Conway surrendered to authorities and was released on a $500,000 bond. Images of her walking into the courthouse dominated news outlets. Her legal team insisted she was innocent, calling the charges politically motivated, but experts were doubtful. "The congressional evidence alone could convict her," said former prosecutor Ellie Honig. "With the FBI raid and whistleblower testimony, her chances are slim." The Conway hearing reshaped American politics. It showed that real consequences existed for ethical and legal violations once considered minor. Other Trump officials accused of Hatch Act breaches began negotiating plea deals, hoping to avoid Conway's fate. For Democrats, it was vindication, a sign that accountability was possible after years of frustration. Representative Jasmine Crockett proved that preparation and persistence could make a difference. For Republicans, it was a reckoning. Many had tied their careers to Trump and now had to choose, defend questionable behavior or distance themselves. Some chose reform. A group of Republican senators announced support for stronger Hatch Act penalties. "We must restore faith in government," said Senator Susan Collins. "That means holding everyone accountable, regardless of party." Others doubled down, accusing Democrats of weaponizing justice. "This is what happens in banana republics," said Senator Josh Hawley. They prosecute their political rivals. The nation grew even more divided. But for the first time in years, it felt like the rule of law mattered again. A month after the hearing, Jasmine Crockett appeared on 60 Minutes with Leslie Stahl. Stahl asked about the defining moment when Conway attacked her, and Crockett's response turned the tide. "I knew she'd make it personal," Crockett said. "That's what people do when cornered. They attack. But I was ready. I studied every hearing she'd been in, every interview she gave. I knew her playbook." When asked if she'd gone too far, Crockett's reply was steady. "For 4 years, we watched an administration act above the law. They broke ethics rules, lied to the public, and undermined democracy, all with a smile. Someone had to say enough. If that makes me aggressive, I call it doing my job." She explained that her background as a public defender prepared her for this. As a defender, you fight for people the system has written off. You learn to seek truth against powerful odds. That's what I did. I fought for the truth. The interview was widely praised, even by some conservatives. Crockett became a symbol of a new political generation, fearless, prepared, and unwilling to back down. 6 months later, Conway's trial began. It became a media spectacle, with crowds outside daily and non-stop coverage. The prosecution's case was devastating. They played the fundraiser video where Conway admitted violating the law, presented emails showing coordination with Trump's campaign, and called witnesses who testified about her disregard for legal boundaries. The most damaging testimony came from her former assistant, who quoted Conway saying, "The Hatch Act is for little people. We make the rules." Her defense argued selective prosecution, but the judge rejected it, noting Conway's deliberate and repeated violations. They also claimed she relied on White House counsel, but prosecutors showed she'd been warned repeatedly her actions were illegal. Conway took the stand in her own defense, but it backfired. Under cross-examination, she contradicted herself, appeared combative, and claimed not to recall sending emails bearing her name. The prosecutor shot back, "Miss Conway, are you saying someone else used your account, or are you lying to this jury?" The jury deliberated less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing, the judge stated, "Miss Conway, you took an oath to serve the American people and uphold the law. You broke that oath repeatedly. This sentence reflects the seriousness of your crimes and the need to deter others who think they're above the law." She was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Her lawyers vowed to appeal, but experts saw little hope. As Conway began serving her sentence, the impact of her clash with Jasmine Crockett rippled through American politics. Law schools began teaching the hearing as a model of effective congressional oversight. Crockett's questioning style became a blueprint for lawmakers nationwide. The Hatch Act, once dismissed as toothless, suddenly had force. Federal employees underwent mandatory training, and violations dropped sharply. More Trump-era officials came under renewed scrutiny, leading to further indictments. For Republicans, Conway's conviction was a turning point. Some used it to separate themselves from Trump and call for traditional conservative principles. Others claimed political persecution, deepening the party's divide, a split that would shape its future. Jasmine Crockett's rise after the hearing was meteoric. She became one of the Democratic Party's most sought-after speakers, headlining fundraisers nationwide. Appointed to the House Judiciary Committee, she became a leading advocate for legal reform and government transparency. Her sharp, disciplined questioning turned every hearing into must-watch television. Talk of a Senate run or even a future presidential bid grew louder. But Crockett stayed grounded, focused on her mission, accountability, and the rule of law. She remained focused on her responsibilities in the House. In interviews, she often said, "I'm not thinking about the next job. I'm focused on doing this one." There was, she explained, still much work to be done to rebuild public trust in government and ensure accountability under the law. She introduced legislation to strengthen the Hatch Act and other ethics standards, with several measures gaining bipartisan support. Over time, she also became a mentor to younger members of Congress, guiding them on how to prepare for hearings and hold witnesses to account. Yet perhaps her most lasting contribution was inspiring a new generation of Americans to believe that accountability was real, that the system could function if people were willing to defend it. A year after Conway began serving her sentence, she gave a prison interview to a conservative podcast. She remained unapologetic, claiming to be a political prisoner and accusing Jasmine Crockett of ruining her life for political advantage. When asked about the comments on CNN, Crockett's response was calm but firm. Miss Conway destroyed her own life when she chose to break the law and lie about it. I didn't make her violate the Hatch Act. I didn't make her lie to Congress or breach her immunity agreement. Those were her decisions. All I did was hold up a mirror and make her face the consequences. That isn't ruining someone's life. That's justice. She paused before adding, and if Miss Conway believes I destroyed her life by revealing her crimes, she should remember the lives affected by the administration she served, people who lost healthcare, jobs, and faith in their government. She was part of something that harmed millions of Americans. Being held accountable for that isn't persecution. It's the least justice demands. The Conway-Crockett confrontation became a defining moment in post-Trump politics. It showed that with courage, preparation, and persistence, accountability was still possible, even for those once seen as untouchable. Political analysts later studied the hearing as an example of effective congressional oversight. It illustrated how Congress could uphold its constitutional duty to check executive power when members approached investigations with diligence and skill. The event also emphasized the value of electing capable, well-prepared representatives. Crockett's background as a public defender and her precise preparation were key to her effectiveness. It wasn't enough to oppose wrongdoing, one had to prove it and pursue it thoroughly. The hearing had a ripple effect. Future officials became more cautious about following ethics rules, aware that violations could carry real consequences. The era of treating laws like the Hatch Act as optional was over. But above all, it restored a measure of hope to Americans who had come to believe the powerful always escaped accountability. It demonstrated that the system, while imperfect, could still function when principled individuals fought for it. Looking back, the moment Jasmine Crockett countered Kellyanne Conway's personal attacks with solid facts and documentation marked a turning point in modern U.S. politics, a moment when accountability returned to Washington. It was when the rule of law began to matter again, led by a young representative from Texas who proved that preparation and truth could overcome manipulation and falsehoods. Conway entered that hearing confident she could manage any challenge from a freshman lawmaker. She was seasoned in media tactics, skilled at deflection, and practiced in turning criticism to her advantage. But she had never faced someone like Jasmine Crockett, someone who had done the homework, gathered the evidence, and refused to be intimidated. What stunned observers was not only Crockett's sharp rebuttal but her methodical dismantling of Conway's falsehoods, exposing her violations, her broken immunity deal, and the collapse of her carefully shaped public image. It proved that in the end, facts matter. Evidence matters. The law matters. When someone has the courage to stand up, present proof, and demand accountability, even the most powerful can be held to justice. Jasmine Crockett didn't just challenge Kellyanne Conway in a hearing. She showed America that democracy could still function, that oversight still had meaning, and that no one stands above the law. In doing so, she reshaped the course of American politics. The impact of that hearing continues. Each time an official considers bending ethics rules, they recall Conway's downfall. Each time a witness thinks about lying to Congress, they remember that cross-examination. Each time someone claims immunity from the law, they're reminded that truth and persistence can bring anyone to justice. That's how Jasmine Crockett changed the landscape of American politics forever. If you found this story insightful, please like this video and subscribe for more in-depth political coverage. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that accountability still matters and that no one is above the law. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Do you think justice was served? Which other political figures should face similar scrutiny? We read every comment, and your engagement helps us keep bringing you stories like this. Thanks for watching, and remember, in a democracy, truth always prevails.